Beep, beep, boop. Hello, hello, hello. Okay. First, I must share my screen. Well, what do you know? It's Nosferatu 2024. So this is a quick stream. I'll try and keep it to an hour. Just some random update stuff, some stuff I've been thinking about. Kind of keeping track of my own inspiration for what the comics I want to make. Because one of the ideas is like, you kind of wonder, like even hypothetically, say you make all the comics you want to make, where would the inspiration come for that like one comic past all the comics you want to make? And I'm kind of curious about that kind of stuff. And like Percival, I almost have enough written and enough to write that could almost like last me the rest of my life. But I'm like, and these things play into that. They can get plugged into it of the kind of itches I want to scratch as I'm going. But new things come up because back in the day it was interactivity, and it's been interactivity for so long. And I'm just now starting to kind of like dabble in some other kind of stuff. It says 2 people watching. By the way, say hi if you're in the chat. Yeah, I got Nosferatu on the screen. 924 out of 1,000. It's getting close. 25 backers. And I did the Nosferatu screening a few days ago. Dale, what's up, man? I know it's a late night show. I don't even know. Well, I just kind of had the itch. Sometimes it's good to go live. I don't know. I wish my live streams were better content for like rewatching or something. I was like, if I could take all the content that I talk about in the live streams and just make a well-edited video essay, then my channel might actually grow. And I want to start trying to do that in February, I think, because I'm still kind of tied down. Yeah, $76 to Destiny. Yes. Yeah, so the screening though, it was pretty fun, and I had some people helping me, which was like pretty cool. Just some people kind of because I don't even know, like within like the small gallery scene in the small town I live in, they find out I'm a pro-ish comic artist, and they'll be like kind of wanting to help me or whatever. So I had some helpers, and we put on this event, and we were selling tickets where you could buy the book also. So like screening for $5 and a copy of the book for 20 if you want. Through that, sold like 15 copies of the book or something, and made a pretty penny. I rented the room myself with my own money, and I wasn't sure. I figured it would probably break even, but I wasn't even sure about that. And I think it at least like doubled that. So I think I might have made $150 or something, like nothing crazy, but it totally went pretty good. It made me think we might want to do it again. And yeah, so that's kind of just the Nosferatu update. Keep that in mind that this is here. This is a new printing with a new cover. Check it out if you haven't yet, especially if you didn't back the first one, then then you're my target audience. Like if you back the first one, I don't want to like, try and double dip on anyone really. Like just, it's cool to, if you are a narwhal enthusiast or collector at all, Nosferatu is a good book. I'm proud of it and everything. And the movie, Robert Eggers movie's coming out in like Christmas. So it's kind of fun timing. And speaking of that, like this event that I held, the timing actually did work with the Robert Eggers thing. Because this campaign kind of hasn't. Like I thought maybe I would get extra backers because of the Robert Eggers thing. But if anything, you almost get less because people get skeptical. They're like, oh, you're just shitting out a book to try and ride the coattails. I'm like, no, I did this first. I did this in 2022. And then Robert Eggers is riding my coattails. Just kidding. Dale, that's a clever way to market the book. Yeah, it worked out nice. And yeah, it was like pretty fun. And I was surprised too. This could actually segue a little bit into the thing, but so it's a screening of the original silent film. The original silent film is pretty darn good, and it's kind of all over the place in a good way. Like it's kind of like pre 3-act structure. Even the movies, I think it literally has 5 acts, so it's like 5-act structure. But then each act is almost like more like a short story, so it's quote unquote more novelistic, you could say. And it'll switch protagonists. One whole act is about Nosferatu getting from like Winsburg to London, or I think on the ship, and the names are all different depending on even the translation maybe of, but Dracula versus Nosferatu, but like because it's the Demeter is like the ship in Dracula, which is an awesome name for a ship. But yeah, the whole act is about the Demeter and everyone dying on the Demeter. Like that's a whole aside from the main story. It kind of takes this little turn and tells you this tale of these fated, and it drops like a line to like a line drop at the end. I think it was like it said something like, and at the end, Nosferatu had become the captain of the ship of death, or something like that. Something better than that. But the line drops, you're like, ooh, nice. And then yeah, like then the wife, the woman who's she is named all different kinds of names too. She's either Mary, Lucy, or I forget, even in the version we watch, it's different than that even. Mina maybe. But she becomes the main character. So I definitely I guess it's more novelistic, and then the opposite of that is like the extreme. It's like three act structure, hero's journey, really, really taut, really tight. It could actually be good, and you can think of good examples that are. But it's a lot more rare these days where you have a little more like of that novelistic feel, and I can break that down a little more. That's kind of what I wanted to do for this, because it's not even for Nosferatu. The main movie I saw that made me think this, it's called Hang 'em High, and it starring Clint Eastwood. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Ellie Munoz, what's up, man? The Final Metamorphosis. I asked what's left of the chat to review Nosferatu if they can reform into a new show. I think it's on the list. Are you going to see the new movie? Yeah, I'm definitely. I can't wait. I love Robert Eggers and I love Nosferatu. I'm a little curious about what he does with it, and I might be like, I'm a little more of a nerd about it. So if he makes any changes, I may or may not like him, but I'm gonna enjoy it no matter what. But I might have my like opinions. And I did see, I think even from the trailers, there's a couple little things that he's doing that I didn't do that I kind of like my version better. And I think one thing that I don't know, I'm curious if he does is I don't know if this is in the books really much either, but in my version I added a little bit of, I don't even know what you'd call it. Well, I think some of this might be in Eggers, and I hope it is. But what's the H.P. Lovecraft thing where it's called like ancient evil and the old ones and stuff? There's a term for the horror. And it's not like Nosferatu should be put into that pantheon, or it's not even like the movie should necessarily be like that per se. But one thing, just the idea with Nosferatu, it fits a lot more that the sun kills him and the moon doesn't kill him. Like he likes the moon, hates the sun. That's like a connection to the astral outer space. It's like a connection to, yeah, like to like the elder, super huge forces, super huge mysterious forces. Like I think even within that H.P. Lovecraft stuff, they talk about the Yellow King, who is not H.P. Lovecraft, but that was one of the first of, shoot, what do they call it? Like ancient horror or something? I don't, cosmic horror. Yeah, yeah. The cosmic aspect of Nosferatu can get played up. But so yeah, the Yellow King, that was one of the first cosmic horror stories. And it's about, there's like one about an ancient city. And then they reveal that the city is actually on another planet. But it's like this evil, dark city that has, like you can kind of like commune with it from Earth potentially, or, like all that stuff gets so kind of fun. Some of the more just straight up, it's almost like kind of been overdone a little bit, so it's not as cool these days. Some of the cosmic horror that's just straight up H.P. Lovecraft, elder gods, whatever. But kind of just the ways it can get. I think in the Eggers version, they say something like they're like he's more than the embodiment of evil. Like he's not evil. He's like, he's darkness itself, or something like that. They say some cool stuff that's like borderline poetic. It kind of ties into the German Expressionism a little bit too. German Expressionism is kind of hard to put your finger on, but it's like I mean, if it's expressionism in painting, that was like a step towards like quote unquote abstract a little bit. Like I think is it like the Scream or whatever, is that like expressionism where it's less about representing what the reality that we see with our eyes and more about representing the reality that is like felt kind of. And so yeah, that goes really well with horror, and you can play into that stuff. But one way it kind of plays in with Nosferatu that's fun is like it's a little bit in this idea that Nosferatu is like a freak. Like they took Dracula and they made him look like a monster. So in the story, Dracula looks like a man, like in the book and in the Dracula movies. So he can trick Harker just by like acting normal. And then Harker does not like it doesn't like alert Harker to be like, "Oh shit, dude, this guy's like fucking a monster, man. I got to get out of here." Oh shit. But then in Nosferatu, they just make him a monster. If Harker actually reacted to that, he'd be like, "Oh shit, dude, I was gonna sell a house to a monster. I'm out of here." But he doesn't. He just like plays it exactly like the Dracula scene, but you've switched Dracula out for a monster and you changed nothing else about it. Another place that this type of dynamic plays out is with the Muppets. And the Muppets is expressionism. It's not German expressionism, but the Muppets are expressionism, where you can have a human interacting with a stuffed animal with a hand up its butt, and they're acting like it's real, and that's kind of like part of the fun. But with Nosferatu, you could say that Nosferatu is hypnotizing him, and there probably is a little bit of that going on. But you could do a totally different reading where you're saying like, no, we aren't seeing what Harker is seeing. We're seeing like the self-projection of Nosferatu himself. We're not seeing what he's projecting to the reality of that movie that Harker is in, that Harker is seeing. And yeah, we see the monster, but Harker doesn't see the monster yet. And that's like a whole German expressionist reading you can do on it. That's like a lot of fun. That doesn't come up too often in movies. This came up a little bit, I think, talking during a creative block. So they're like Lovecraftian. Yeah, that's the other thing. Chambers wrote The Yellow King. It was part of the genre's existential horror. Dracula also has seductive powers, so human reactions can be muted. Yeah, he could have also, what do you call it, like hypnotized. There's definitely an element of that. But yeah, so we'll see. I can't wait for the Eggers thing. Um, so with Hang 'em High, the fact. So one other random thing is on my. I have a mailing list. I promoted it today for comics, but I have an older one that has only like 300 signups or so. That's purely just like essays about storytelling. And I haven't done one in like a year, but I did like 60 total, and they're all kind of long, maybe more than that. And so it could totally be like a book, but it wouldn't be as focused and cool as interactivity. But I was like, it could be like a follow up. So I've kind of been going back through them and putting them in a document, like copy and pasting, and then I might try and it into a book later. And I've been rereading them, and some of them are fun. That's the thing though, that it's a little hit and miss. Like as far as like, is this good enough to be in a book? It's like maybe half. I'm like, oh, this is pretty good, and then even like a fifth, where I'm like, ooh, I'm glad I reread that because that is definitely sparking some inspiration or whatever. The one that I always think of is I wrote one. It's called The Psychology of the Past Pawn. And that could play into a little bit what I'm coming up with here too, is like beyond interactivity, you can strike on things once in a while where this inspiration comes from, where you're like, I just want to explore that aspect of psychology. Because definitely psychology is like a huge part of just what people are thinking. You put them in situations. It could be like even a fantasy style situation of like, this is a little bit of an aside too, but like the things we fantasize about, they're often like quite relatable beyond just like sexual fantasy. But there's one like who is fantasized about if you ever go on hikes in the woods, have you ever fantasized about what you would do if a cougar attacked, and if you might like use a stick to like keep it off or climb a tree or whatever your plan for survival, like everyone thinks about that. And it's not that that would like play into a story, but it's coming upon these things that are super relatable, that can be a good source of like inspiration. Yeah. Notes from the Nar Ledge. Good for a Substack. Yeah, it's almost like a Substack is what I was kind of doing with the mailing list. Um, but so one thing is like beyond interactivity, it's if you can come up with these psychological like situations that are kind of, if they're a little bit outside the box, and if they can get a little bit to the point where it's like, oh, this almost, you could almost say this hasn't been done before, which, like they say of the quote, like, there's nothing new under the sun. They say there's only seven kinds of stories. But if you're getting psychological, there are little like aspects that could be kind of new. And I'll give you one example. We'll go through Hang 'em High, but one example, I mentioned this on Creative Block, but I just kind of real quick is like, if there was a OnlyFans girl who got approached by a billionaire tech company to use her likeness to make sex bots, she says no, but they do it anyway. And then so she, like, if this was like a Batman story or something, she, finds a way to break in. She has like an army of like helpers or whatever. She's like Catwoman, I don't know. But she breaks in and like wants to shut it down. But then they find out that there's a separate order for sex bots that were made with edible plastic that are like presumably meant to be eaten. And so she wants to know who. So that's kind of the. And I just like at that point, I want to know like what the reader would think. Like to me, that's like a lot of intrigue, because if I was that girl, I would want to know who ordered the edible version of me, and I just want to like figure out what that is. And then what it would be is like it's like a celebrity party, like a creepy, like a P Diddy-esque party, and they have this this version of her that they made edible, and they're going to cannibalize it ritualistically at this party. And so she would like eventually crash the party and kill everyone, or so, not exactly that, but so that one I was like, I feel like that's all, you could almost say that that's never been done before. But even psychologically, yeah, this question of like, there's a version of you that is like made as a cake. Like even if it wasn't a sex bot, because that puts like two steps in between, kind of makes it a detective story to figuring out all this stuff. But if it was like, yeah, like you find out that P Diddy held a party and they made a cake version of you and they were eating it, like how would you feel? Like what would you want to do? You'd want to like confront them, tell them to stop. You'd want to figure out why they were doing that. It might make you paranoid if it's like part of a a ritual that they're doing. But Alex VRB, what's up, man? Yeah, LE says you have to mount the cougar to prove dominance. Yeah, and then you can ride it everywhere. You stick your like stick right in its jaw, and then that becomes your steering wheel. If the OnlyFans Girls LLC could be protected by our company, much like Stanley's image. Yeah, yeah, we're just hanging, Alex. I'm going over a few random things, but so that's one, and then the psychology of the past pawn. That's almost like one where that's on my to-do list. I'm gonna try and fit that into Percival, but that's kind of like the idea that in chess, if pawns get to the end of the board, they can become a queen or anything, but probably a queen because that's super powerful. So pawns, you have the most of them, and they're the weakest, most like not they're the weakest and the most limited movement. They can only move one. They can only move forward, only one space at a time, and so that they just kind of aren't that great. But if the pawn gets towards the end with nothing in front of it and the end of the board, they call that a passed pawn. At that point, it becomes one of the more powerful pieces on the board. All the energy of the battle will focus around whether or not the pawn can make it to the end or not. And the game becomes about that. And the pawn, who was this lowly piece of shit, all of a sudden is like possibly going to be the most powerful piece on the board. And even right now, his potential, everyone knows it, feels it, sees that he's going for it. He can see the end of the line right there. So like that, you could think of where that would be. Like I could, you could kind of do a version of that if it's just like high schoolers playing capture the flag, but but there's kind of higher stakes, and there's like one fat kid who everyone bullies, and then it just so happens that he is the guy who he realizes he actually has a chance to win this thing, and so he makes his move and goes for it, and then everyone notices, and then he becomes the focus of the game. Like, and that would be good. You could do that; it would work. But if you can think of examples where that works really well, and put it into a story, the psychology of the passed pawn, that is something I want to do. Another one that randomly came up with when I was actually playing chess was I got my rook on the back line of the enemy. Their what is it? It's like their H line or whatever. And it's not even what it's called. I don't know. It's like the back line though. So he was behind enemy lines, and I ended up like pincering with him and winning. And I was like, damn, got my rook. But when he's behind enemy lines, it's like super dangerous for him. So again, if you think of the psychology, you're like, okay, we have the potential to be the most important piece on the board, but also everybody knows we're here and is going to try and stop us now. David held back rank. Yeah, the back rank. Nice. Mongo only pawn in game of life. As opposed to Chinese chess, where if you get to the end of the board, you can start a communist revolution and oust the bourgeoisie. Yes. Okay, so I want to try and type for you guys what the Hang'em High plot was. See if I can do it kind of fast, because then you'll see the point. Maybe if just as I'm typing it, the idea, I guess, not because I mentioned it earlier, but it feels more novelistic, less three-act structure, less hero's journey, and I kind of like. I'm in this phase where I really like the more novelistic style, where it'll kind of break more rules. It won't even follow rules. Sometimes it's like random, but it's random in a way that feels real rather than a way that feels crappy. And on the flip side too, yeah, if you have like you can have a three-act structure hero's journey. Sometimes those will feel so like well pieced together that it feels written, and that can not always feel the best, even if it like kind of works okay. So hang him high, Clint. He gets hung like wrongly by a lynch mob of 9 dudes. Then sheriff cuts him down, takes him into town, and puts him in prison. And he's like, I don't know if you done what you did, but you're going to get a fair trial. And if you didn't do it, they're going to let you go. So then they let him go. But he lost all his money. So he takes a job with the judge. So then he's working. So it kind of has nothing to do with the main plot. Is like you imagine it's like he wants revenge on these 9 dudes, and the judge says to him like, just work for me, and yeah, maybe we can catch those guys. Like, and what else you gonna do? You got no money. So Clint Eastwood says yes. So he gives him some money, and he's like, all right, first thing you got to do is go pick up this Swede. That's the other thing the judge says. He's like, our territory is so huge, and I'm the only judge for this huge territory. So we're understaffed. Like, we need people, blah, blah, blah. So he has to go pick up this Swede who's like this big guy, like 7-foot guy being held in another town. Transfer to be tried by the judge. And so he goes there. He's going to pick him up. It's all just like by the numbers, sort of. But then he sees in this town, he sees his saddle, which was stolen from him by the lynch mob. So that is interactivity. So that's kind of cool. Like, he sees the saddle, we know. We're like, oh shit. He's like, but this is random. you could say this is luck or whatever, you know. And this is kind of getting the story going. So he sees him. So he goes in. He goes in, confronts the guy. The judge told him you got to take everyone alive, but this guy draws on him anyway, so he blasts him. He blasts him away, kills him. So he loses all leads. He doesn't know any. He was gonna maybe try and get the names of the other guys, blah blah blah, but he loses all leads. So then, so then he just goes back with the Swede, and most of that is implied. They just cut to later, and he's delivered the Swede. And they've also established that there's this woman who checks everyone who comes into town. I will type this because it's kind of part of it. There's a woman who checks everyone who comes into town because she wants revenge on someone, but you don't know who. So there's a little bit of like intrigue there. So then he gets back, and then one of the 9, the only one who wasn't super shitty, turned himself in. And he did this off screen. As Clint Eastwood's walking back with the Swede, this has already happened. So the judge catches him up. And this is, again, like, it feels more like a novel. It feels more real. Like, all the little events are not going to happen just in front of your eyes like a VR game, and when you look, it triggers the event to happen. It's like, no, shit's just happening. You miss some, you catch some later, whatever. So he gives him the names. So he gives him the names. So he has 7 warrants now, and they all live in a nearby town. So, the SS Minnow Skipper. Is Clinton known as the man with no name and hang him high? See, I don't think so. I want to look what year it was, and because I got the feeling this one is not a Italian Western, a spaghetti Western. I think Hang 'em High is American, and I don't know where it fits. Like, is it like before, after? Maybe we can do that right now. Oh, it is interesting. But yeah, because Hang 'em High, it felt like sort of realistic in a lot of ways. Like there's no like superhero shooting in the thing. Like it's more like The Godfather. Like there's a time where Clint gets a hit put on him basically, and the three cowboys run up behind him and just blow him away. But he doesn't die. He gets shot a lot and doesn't die, but he has to recuperate for like months. That's towards the end. We'll get to that. But okay, so turn himself in and gets his name. Okay. So he goes to the town, immediately sees one of the guys, arrests him, takes him to the sheriff. The sheriff says, "Hey, these guys are my friends." And Clint says, "I don't give a fuck." And then, but there's a little tension there because you're like, the sheriff, is he a bad guy, good guy? What's going on there? And the sheriff's like, "Well, I know where he's like, well, this guy's a drifter, but these other dudes, they're out here, we can go get them. So let's lock this guy up and let's go get these others." So they take off for 2 more with the sheriff. Then they get interrupted by this, another like randomly by the sheriff's deputy. He says some bandits just killed his dad and brother and stole their herd. And then Clint doesn't want to go catch him because he just wants to get these 2 guys they're supposed to get. But then the sheriff is like, "Come on, are you or aren't you a man of the law? The law has been broken. Are you going to help or not?" And I can't do it because I got a bad back. So like, You just got to go. And so Clint Eastwood, Clint goes with the guy. He joins this like it's its own like posse, and they catch him pretty easy. But then and it's two boys and it's one of the nine, one of the bad guys. So it is, again, this is almost like you could say it's convenient, but it all just feels like random in a real life kind of way. And they did give that a little setup too, because that guy sees that Clint Eastwood is in town, so this is why he rustled the cows and ran. And that guy, he's played by the old man in the Tarantino movie that is called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The old blind man that's in like the shack that Bruce Dern. He's played by Bruce Dern, but he's young Bruce Dern. And young Bruce Dern is the greatest. Young Bruce Dern steals the show from Clint when they're on screen together. But it's like Clint has to play this like basically the man with no name style, and Bruce Dern gets to like have some actual personality. But he's such a good actor, and I was thinking like I'm like, what is the deal with like the magic? Because that is the best part of the whole movie is the Clint Eastwood Bruce Dern, and that is like a big chunk of it. It's like almost 20 minutes. So this is kind of the main. This is like randomly the main part of the movie is the main part of the movie is the posse wants to lynch the three people. Clint says no, but then they abandon him because they're pissed. And then he has to bring in three outlaws, like 3 days ride through the desert by himself. And so the movie does spend time with that section. And during that section, Bruce Dern does escape once, but Clint knocks him down. And the boys have been like very, they've been good the whole time, and they don't like fight Clint. They don't help him, but they don't hurt him. So Clint kind of like likes him. So he puts in, when he does get back, he gets back just barely. And it's a legendary thing kind of. So he's famous for that, the 3-day ride to bring in these outlaws. So he gets back, and then he puts in a good word for the boys. Now I'm trying to think what happens after that point. So then, so there's still like 5 people to kill. And so this is what it is. So then one thing, he passes out when he gets back and recuperates, and the judge buys him a whore to bring him breakfast. So he gets laid and he gets some eggs or whatever. And then he goes into the judge and he's like, okay, now I'm going to go back and do what I was supposed to do this whole time, which is go see that sheriff with the bad back and bring in those other 2 broskies or those other dudes, other dudes. And then the sheriff says, not yet. You gotta stay and give like testimony. So then the sheriff, the bad back sheriff, shows up, and he gives Clint $800, which is what he lost in the beginning because he bought this herd that had been stolen, and that's why he got lynched. So the people had kept the money they found on him, but so they don't want to be killed, and they're all scared. This is the other thing about the movie. It's like the people who lynched him are not badasses. Like he could kill them easily, so they're like scared of him. So they're friends with that sheriff too. So the ways it's like kind of it's like complicated in ways, but it just like feels like a full world, which is fun. Um, and so the sheriff comes, gives him $800, kind of was like, is this enough of a peace offering for you to lay off? Um, of a peace offering for you to lay off? Clint says no. So then the sheriff, he delivers the news back to the dudes, and they're like, well, shit, we lost all this money. It didn't even work. So maybe we can try and kill him. So then Clint, meanwhile, is super pissed at the judge because the judge is still hanging the boys who Clint put in a good word. So then the day of the hanging comes up, and it's a big hanging. A lot of people are coming all at once, and it's the Swede is there, Bruce Dern is there, and the boys and a few others. And then you're kind of wondering what's going on here. Like Clint Eastwood is just like, and this whole scene, it is a little bit more like a Francis Ford Coppola assassination Godfather style set piece where you're kind of following everyone. Everyone's tense, like, damn, these people are gonna die. Clint Eastwood is like trying to distract himself. He meets with the whore one more time. Then he just goes down to the bar and he's pouring himself a drink and he's just like super pissed. And then they do kill, like, they hang everyone. So everyone dies. And they're kind of just like, the whole event is happening. And then as all this is happening and everyone's just kind of like processing it, so I don't think people cheer. I forget what happens in the movie, but after they hang, it's like the crowd sort of disperses. So it's kind of over. I don't know if they had live music, like the band is playing or whatever. And then the three of the people who are left, they run up behind Clint Eastwood in the bar. Run up behind Clint in the bar and they blow him away. And then, so I'm wondering too, at this point, you're kind of like, all right, I know the movie is going to like end when he kills all 9 of the dudes, but you're kind of like, it kind of will ease you into this idea like, hey, we're going to do what we want to do when we want to do it. This story is a yarn that will sprawl in interesting, fun ways if you give it a chance. We're not just focused on that he's got to do this thing, And maybe that could go too far, but again, older movies, I see way more of that. Newer movies, I see like almost none. And I do like it a lot when movies do that and when stories do that. So then he's blown away, but he doesn't die. And then the woman who wants revenge herself nurses him back to health. Where would you guess we're into like a 2-hour movie? How far into it we are now? Like there's like a half hour left at this point. So this is almost like, this is a little bit of like an emotional climax that they're doing where they fall in love and they have some stuff that happens with that that's all working pretty good. But then the woman is like ice cold. And you find out because her husband died and she got raped by these 2 like outlaws. And she wants them dead. So she checks every day to see if it was them who gets brought in, and so she can like testify against them or whatever. And then Clint Eastwood kind of convinces her like they're never gonna come. Like you're wasting your life, and when you could like fall in love with a new guy and live your life or whatever. So he kind of wins her over, and he does this with very few words, classic Clint Eastwood style. It's all well written and good. And then she does tell him, she's like, I'll like leave my demons behind or whatever to go with you, but can you do the same? And he goes, "There's a difference between you and me. You're going after ghosts, but me, the end of my trail is in Red Hill or whatever." So he like rides off, and he's feeling better now. And there's of the nine, two of them left, so there's three left who want to like hold up and face him and try and kill him, and they know he's coming. And two just ran, and again, like kind of like random, like so who knows if he goes after them too, the movie would be way longer. That would feel weird, you know. So you don't even know exactly what's going on. But then Clint goes, and then he ends up taking on those three guys, and there's a little action scene. It's kind of fun, but it's nothing crazy. It's sort of realistic. And it ends a little bit ironically, like some dramatic irony, because the last survivor, the supposed worst bad guy, he's the last survivor, and he's kind of scared because his friends have been killed by that point, and he hangs himself before Clint can get to him. So Clint comes upon him, and he's hanging, and then that's sort of the end. Like the main bad guy just died, but it doesn't end right away. You're wondering like what other things could it tie up, you know? And there's a few things it hasn't tied up. It's sort of tied up because this is like as a novel, like if you wrap everything up, it could feel overwritten, but you don't want to leave unsatisfied. And so it wrapped up the emotional arc with the woman. She left behind her demons and she's moved on. So she's like feeling a lot better, but it's still no guarantee that her and Clint Eastwood will end up together. And they don't necessarily wrap that up. But Clint, the one thing they haven't wrapped up yet is Clint, his like relationship with the judge, who the judge killed the two boys when Clint didn't want him to. So Clint like kind of hates him, but the judge is like sort of a good guy. That's another like kind of cool novelistic thing, like this kind of complicated where they're both good guys. They really don't like each other on this one thing, and other than that, they actually like each other. But this is like a thing that's threatening to like tear them apart. And so, and there's two like kind of alpha males. Like Clint Eastwood is obviously alpha male. The judge, in his own way, is, but also he's just like a judge. So he's just like he is higher than Clint Eastwood. He's like his boss. So the last thing is Clint Eastwood goes and visits the first bad guy who turned himself in. Who we kind of forgot about him, but he's just been rotting in jail this whole time, and he's coughing. And Clint Eastwood says like, "I just want you to know I don't bear you any ill will." And the guy's like, he's like, and Clint Eastwood's like, "I don't know if it's worth anything." And the guy's like, "It's worth something." And he's like, "But," he's like, I'm glad to hear it because I'm gonna die anyway. You know, I'm gonna die soon anyway. So it'll all be over for the people you got to get," or something like that. And then so Clint Eastwood goes to the judge and he says, "You gotta let that guy go. Like, you let him go, or I'm like," I don't know if he says like, "or I'm gonna like kill you," or whatever, something. But he like, yeah, he's like, "You gotta let him go." And the judge kind of like knows what's up too. And the judge is like, "All right, but if you quit, I'm not gonna do it. You have to keep working for me." And he gives him the badge. And so they kind of make this again almost like a deal with the devil. It's not really what Clint Eastwood wants. He wants to kind of settle down with the girl, but he picks up the badge, and then the judge lets the guy go, and then Clint rides off to go catch the last two, and that's the end of the movie. So that's yeah. So kind of as I was going over it, I was mentioning as it goes, but I don't know. It's like how would you put it? It's like for one example, AI could never write that. Like I think eventually, if AI gets good at writing, AI will be able to do the taut, like clever plotting with three acts and narrative drive and blah blah blah. But if people can just write like a movie that feels like it really happened, kind of, meaning like it's kind of random in the way that real life is, and you're just following it, but it's never boring. Like that's better in my opinion. Although you know it's apples to oranges, and I like them both, and I like to do both on occasion or whatever. But this is what I've been into lately a lot more is like that randomness of real life with heavy focus on the psychological aspects of it, which even Hang 'em High, there's a fair amount of that. Because I've said it in previous like creative blocks or whatever, but the movies like it's so novels are like this too, but movies are so much tied to psychology. Um, and yeah, let me see what you guys are saying. Alex Witherow. I wish westerns made a big return. I'd say the success of the Taylor Sheridan stuff shows there's an appetite. I know, and it's kind of a bummer because they did that movie, but it bombed. The Kevin Costner did the one, and it bombed. So it's like, damn, like, and I didn't go see it, but I don't think it came around where I was, or else I would have, because I was keeping an eye on that one. Uh, yeah, I love a good western. I have a western script I plan to produce someday. Yeah, guilty pleasure is Hell on Wheels, bad acting, but Chief Miles O'Brien is Railroad Tycoon. Oh, I gotta watch that. Yeah, I was thinking I do. I love westerns too, and they're like such a good one to watch to kind of dip back into the well of inspiration because I hadn't watched a movie in a while. Well, it maybe just been a week, but I'd gone down to like watching one movie a week because I'll go through phases where I'll watch like a movie a day or whatever. But the last one I had watched before this was The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which was from 1939, and that was amazing actually too, and that was very inspiring. And that one, it was novelistic. It's based on a novel, but it it was a little bit different. It didn't necessarily like feel like a real like it really happened, but it was like all over the place in awesome ways. Like that's kind of one thing I'm just trying to think of is like if you think of a story as like point A to point B kind of thing, like I'm in a phase right now where I'm not into that. I want the story to be like hopefully like the audience experience would be like because if you do two, you could imagine if they're in the mood for A to B and you give them wonky, they might really not like that. But there's a way where you can kind of do it where you ease them into it or something. I think Tarantino's is like if they feel like they're in good hands, then they'll kind of go along with it. And I know David Lynch movies will kind of do that too, where they'll just go where they want to go. I heard someone say that they'll be filled with vignettes, which is a little like a way of saying like short stories almost, like in the movie. All of a sudden you got like a new character walk in who's like a main character in his own right, but he's not the main character of this story. And like there could be a scene with him that's like really fun or whatever. Um, yeah. Michael Dishe. I like how the plot kind of bounces around. It definitely doesn't stick to the strict linear plot beat Hollywood formula. Exactly. That's what I felt was like inspiring about it. Because I'd almost like this was something that I feel like I knew, but then you kind of it gets to the back of your head and you almost forget about it. And I rewatched that, I was like, oh yeah, that's the inspiration. That's like what I kind of want to keep an eye on. Because if I even feel like the flip side is when you feel like inspiration draining or where it's not there when it should be, and you're like, why am I not inspired right now? Like if I'm trying to think of a project or like what's a new story I want to tell, oh, I'm just not inspired. A lot of times it'll be in that initial phase where it's so formulaic or whatever, so A to B, and then I have no inspiration. But the second it gets a little weird and a little bit uh, all over the place, and some of that comes from world building, I've noticed. So like even in Hang 'em High, like you know you don't have to know a crap load, but you have to know like two or three towns worth of world building. And that's kind of a lot. Like you need to know, yeah, like it starts with Clint Eastwood buying from a cattle salesman who he finds out later had been killed. He bought from the outlaw, and that's why he was hung because he was they thought he was the outlaw. But so you got to know about that. You know about that. There's a cattle seller. There's someone who wants to buy them. There's these two towns. The one town has the sheriff who's friends with all these people, but that they formed the lynch mob that got Clint Eastwood. And yeah, the judge and the judge's situation. Oh, I forgot to put one thing into it. Oh my gosh. So it's in the beginning. The guy who saves Clint Eastwood, he's another sheriff. And you find out later on, again off screen, you find out he died. and he just died doing his job, and it's like kind of sad. And they pour one out for him, and I'm like, man, like so novelistic. Or the other way you could put it is like it's yeah like random in a way that doesn't feel written. It feels like it actually happened. It's like the way that real life can be random, that's the way this movie is, where not everything is tailored perfectly just for your eyes as they're looking at it, like but in that beginning, that guy, he has to pick up. So Clint Eastwood is in like the jail trailer that they're picking up all the bad guys to move them to the central to get tried or whatever, and they had to pick up a new guy. So he goes to pick him up, and they apparently had chained this guy up because he was too crazy. So they're like, "Here's the key. Good luck. He's crazy. You deal with it." And he's like, "What the fuck?" So he goes in, and he's a famous actor too. So this guy who you end up only seeing him, this sheriff, I forget his name, but he's awesome in everything he's in. He's in One-Eyed Jacks with Marlon Brando and stuff. But he's only in the beginning, and then you find out he dies off screen later. And he's like, again, he's like, he could be a main character. Like, he's such a leading, and he is in other movies. He'll be a leading man cowboy or whatever. But so he goes in and he sees the guy chained up, and the guy who's chained up, gosh, now I'm forgetting thinking of his name, but who is the really famous actor who did uh I'm thinking of it. He's in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I'm gonna Google it because it matters for this little part of it. um I just want to see the cast. Oh yeah, I'm bummed when it doesn't tell me what I want it to tell me. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Dennis Hopper. Sorry that took me a while. I bet chat got it while I was guessing. McConaughey? No. Dennis Hopper. So Dennis Hopper, young Dennis Hopper, is locked up in this, like, it's not even a jail where they got him locked up. He's in a room, and so he uncuffs him. He's gonna take him, but he's kind of so crazy. He like knocks him back, and he just starts running, and he's ranting. He's like, "You're gonna kill the prophet! You're gonna kill the prophet!" And then the guy doesn't know what to do, and the guy's like, "Dude, stop running, or I'll shoot you. I'm gonna shoot you, man. Stop!" And he's like, "You're gonna kill the prophet!" And he starts running, and the guy aims, boom, blasts him, and shoots him. And then he keeps running. He shoots him again, and then he falls and dies. And then they get up and keep going. And Clint Eastwood looks at the dead body as he leaves or whatever. And I was like, damn, like, I saw Dennis Hopper's name in the credits, and I was like, oh, Dennis Hopper's in this movie? That's awesome. I wonder what he plays. He plays like an iconic character who has like 20 seconds of screen time and dies like immediately. The other iconic character who kills him is on screen for like 2 minutes, and then you find out he dies off screen. So that's kind of part of this world building thing. Like, you meet these characters. The only reason that scene had nothing to do with the movie, other than like, not even necessarily like thematically. It's not like it rhymes that much with what happened to Clint Eastwood. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, it is at least a little bit. If the theme of the movie, you could say it's like justice being explored. So they have mob justice is explored, and then true-ish, yeah, like what real justice through a judicial court is explored, and how that's a line Clint Eastwood has towards the end too, or when he gets mad at the judge, he's like, those boys would have got lynched out there. That's why went all that trouble to take them back. They get hung here, then they might as well have got lynched out there. Like, it meant my whole journey meant nothing, because it's the same outcome. And he's like, mob justice and the federal justice, they look exactly the same. And the guy's like, if you think that, you're in the wrong line of business. Blah, 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 blah. But yeah, so this is just another vignette they showed of like, it's kind of an in-between where this is not mob justice and this is not federal justice. This guy didn't get a trial, but he didn't get killed by a mob, but he did like run when he wasn't supposed to. Yeah. Is Civilization just a show? Maybe. It's that Hopper. Dennis Hopper was never young. I know. Yeah, his career was weird too because he did the one movie and I can't even think of it. It's the biker movie, Easy Rider. Yeah, yeah. And then I think that got him like super famous, but it's not like that much came from it. He was just in 70s movies. He was just kind of a regular actor. He, I don't know. Like he was in Apocalypse Now and apparently he was high all the time. I don't know if they all were high all the time. And I think he's good in the movie, but yeah, it's like he had a different approach to acting. I don't think he gave too much of a shit. And then he aged kind of fast. And then he was a really good actor all through the 80s and 90s, but I'm like, what was he in? In the 90s, it was getting like he's like the bad guy in Waterworld, I think, and like some other stuff. He wasn't in like legendary movies. Oh, he's in the one you guys probably might like a lot, the Tarantino written one. What's it called? He's great in that. He's really good in it. Is he in Speed? Yeah, he's the bad guy in Speed. But what's the Tarantino written one with Christian Slater? True Romance. Still, you got it. Yeah, he plays Christian Slater's dad, and he's great in that. That's like probably his best work. Um, so that's one thing, and then that's an hour. So I'll kind of wrap up soon. Doing these streams, these are like kind of like writing vlogs ish, you know. So that's like what the category would be, and I've found that they're good for me. Like they help me. They help me creatively if it's saying stuff out loud or whatever. And maybe it helps just to like run my mouth a little because if I go a whole day where I'm just drawing, I live alone, you know, so I'm like, I won't even be talking. So it's good to talk a little bit or whatever. But I might get a pet sooner or later. Might get a kitty cat or a doggy, or I will teach the crows to love me by feeding them peanuts. I'm not sure. Become the crow man. Or maybe I'll get, I don't know, probably just a cat or a dog. So this was from Creative Block, talking about if you put core at the end of stuff, how that can create an aesthetic. Like assassination core, fishing core, tennis core. It's like you could put punk at the end of stuff too. But yeah, outside the box vision. I think I did a video going over this maybe. Um, chess quotes. Whoever sees no other aim in the game than that of giving checkmate to one's opponent will never become a good chess player. Yeah. So check out how that applies to hang 'em high. Like we just talked about the whole plot. Like if you say like if the goal is just to kill the 9 guys who lynched him, then the story would be totally different. But that is not the goal of the story. And I guess the goal in a way it is. I only thinking of it now as I was saying it. It is to show the different aspects of justice from different points of view. That's totally the point of the movie. But yeah. But even within that, you know, it's like it's not chained to it. Like it can do whatever it wants at any point. And that's very freeing and inspirational and fun. Everything that happens in movies that is good happens by accident, John Ford. Love that quote too. Psychology. Yeah. So this is that document of trying to put it into what would be like the third possible book, which would be the inspirational pocketbook. And this one would be shorter and more dense, more concise. A lot of like lists and bullet points and just things that kind of possibly inspire. Um, but yeah, the one other thing that lately that I've been into besides interactivity, and it kind of goes with this stuff, but it's kind of like the mind. It's like when you get into realms where you're like, this almost feels like this hasn't been done before. Like whatever it could be, I think it's still kind of possible. Stories can kind of have little combinations and psychological things happening that feel kind of new, and at the very least they feel outside the box. and the audience feels that when it's happening. It could feel like sometimes it feels like, oh shit, this story's like pretty legit, which would in a way that takes him out of the story. Like this story is more than I thought it would be. Like this is not your average whatever. I was thinking, yeah, if there's an example you pick, like I pretty much have come to terms with, yeah, like so if there's like a bounty hunter story, I feel like that's when there's like a million bounty hunter stories that have been told, and maybe you can't think of a new one, but you kind of want to try and think of like, is there a way that you can put a twist on it where it gets a little bit outside the box? That kind of makes it fun. That makes the uh, what's it called? The inspiration flow a little bit. Oh yeah, you guys talking about Blue Velvet? I love Blue Velvet. It's pretty much my favorite movie of all time. It's exactly what we're talking about and what you guys are talking about. Yeah, I didn't even mention it, but you guys brought it up. Yeah. Uh, yeah, I get an actual narwhal. That'd be cool. Uh, oh yeah, he's the bad guy in the Mario Brothers movie. Yeah. Oh, you know one thing about him that was cool though? There was this point in his career where he just became a working actor and did all sorts of like random roles, and he's good in them. He was just like a pro. I wonder if behind the scenes, I'd like to think he was really professional behind the scenes too, because that's his reputation when he was young, is that he wasn't professional and he was spoiled almost because he got so successful at a young age. But there was a movie called Space Truckers that's actually like low budget and potentially not the greatest. Like it's like maybe direct to video movie or something. But I kind of remember liking it, and I really remember liking his performance in it. Let me see what you guys are saying. Wonders for your brand. That would be pretty good. I'll think about it. Blue Healer. My brother's got one of those, and I dog sit for her like once a year. Yep, direct to cable. Yeah. Yes. So yeah, I'm kind of wrapping up here, but Norm from Cheers, nice. But I was gonna say, I just want this last thought of like, sometimes sometimes it would be like if a story, if it does like blow your mind a little bit with where it goes, which could be like a revelation or a twist or an unfolding moment of the story. All stories will naturally have that unfolding aspect, and like a big unfolding moment in there's kind of multiple in Hang 'em High, but it's pretty big when he's going to get the two guys, and then the one guy has already been attacked, and the deputy comes like, they killed my dad and my brother, they stole all our cattle, we got to go after him. And then he goes after him. That's like a big unfolding moment because the whole story like changes. And anytime the story's doing that, a lot of times that's like pretty good, and you're like, okay, where are we now? I've talked about it in the past too. If you think of the story as like a story is like a matrix, and the matrix can be what we expect, and then the story can break its own matrix. So that's kind of a point where the story breaks its own matrix, because it's meant to be like, oh yeah, he's gonna go to that town, there's gonna be a confrontation, maybe a shootout, then he gets him, he brings him back, maybe he gets him alive or not, but then they hang him, and then he's got to get the other guys. And this is like, nope, like record scratch, we're doing this instead. A lot of Tarantino movies do that. Um, and it's like we can get back to that. It's kind of, it feels like a good way to put it is novelistic, and that's one way Tarantino talks about his stories too. But yeah, thinking about that stuff is very freeing. Just remembering that you can do that, and it is like, it's still a balance, because you got to strike that perfect balance where it feels really nice. Like one example of breaking your own matrix, I mentioned this is kind of the main example of it, but if in Die Hard, if John McClane, if halfway through the movie he like hang glides off the roof and escapes, and he's like, fuck yeah, I got away. But there's still half the movie to go. And you're like, what the fuck? You're not going to stay and like save the people? Like, And so then he like he just like goes and tells the cops. They're like, yeah, we already know. We're down there negotiating with them now. And they're like, you were behind enemy lines. Oh, speaking of past pawn, that is a psychology of the past pawn. Die Hard is a psychology of the past pawn movie. That's hilarious. That's so awesome. But yeah, like imagine that. So you would have like a mind blowing moment because you'd be like, oh dude, I thought this movie was one thing, but now it broke its own matrix. It's become something completely new that quote unquote maybe has never been done before. It's not a twist, but it's this unfolding moment where yeah, he found a hang glider on the roof and he just hang glided off, and so then you still got half a movie. You're like, well, what's he do now? He's like, I think I'm just gonna like get a coffee and like watch it on TV because I'm worried about my wife. Then it all just plays out like normal. Hans gets away with the money and his wife like lives. And he's like, I'm glad you made it, honey. I was stuck up there for a little bit, but luckily I found a hang glider and I hang glided off of there. But that would be like an example where that would make it worse. So you can't really do that. Or could you? Or could you? Uh, that sex doll story you told earlier, I was trying to find it. It starts out as a revenge justice story after a big twist. It sounds like Gonzo Mystery. Second part sounds like Under the Silver Lake. Yeah, and I love Under the Silver Lake. I do love that movie. Um, yeah. Oh, I thought of something that I wanted to put Under the Silver Lake style thing in it, maybe, but I don't know. That's written. That's a different thing. EC. It's kind of the structured macro version of the idea you mentioned before of how you said the character can't say they'll do a thing and then do it in the next scene. It has to either cut or do something else. Yeah, I just noticed that. Yeah, if you ever do that, it feels weird. It feels redundant. Um, and that is like, yeah, the only thing that might be like a legit rule. Like try to break that rule and actually do it. It seems really hard. It always feels weird. Feels wrong if someone like even if Bruce Willis like in Die Hard his cell phone is still working and or I don't know if they have cell phones back then. Say he has a cell phone though, and so he calls his wife. He's like, "Honey, I'm on the roof," and she's like, "Oh, you're on the roof? Are you gonna like help us escape?" He's like, "Well, yeah, but I was thinking I probably should save myself first because I'm in a lot of danger. I had to walk on some glass and stuff. I killed one guy, but I don't think I can make it for all these guys. The odds are against me, hun. So I found this hang glider up here. I think I'm gonna take it. Do you think that'd be okay with you if I take the hang glider? And then I was thinking I might get a cup of coffee and just watch you, make sure you're okay. I'll tell the cops though when I get out. And she's like, whatever, just do what you gotta do, honey. Like, if you think you can't do it, then you probably can't. So just take the hang glider. He's like, okay, I will. And then he grabs the hang glider and then he goes and gets a cup of coffee. It's like that would be if you cut to just him in already drinking a cup of coffee, watching her, and then you know that all that happened. Like that would be kind of funny. But if you show him do it, and he just said he's gonna do it. Yeah, it's terrible. Or if he doesn't say it and he just finds the hang glider and does it, like that's kind of awesome. Yeah, there's all these versions where you could like write a version of the movie that ruins the movie, and then just make that the new movie. I want to do that. I want to make a new version of Die Hard that's just like where nothing goes as it's supposed to go. But so this is you guys. This is deconstruct. This is the definition of deconstruction, which I know a lot of people hate. It's not like I love it, but that kind of stuff is there. It's like a sine wave. It's like you don't always want deconstruction. You don't always want the super earnest, whatever, straightforward. If you can do like earnest deconstruction that is not straightforward, like not even like thinking about deconstruction, but sometimes you do think about it. Like Pulp Fiction's amazing, but people claim it's deconstruction, and it kind of is. But like I think people claim like Dark Knight, they might claim that's deconstruction. I mean, it's good though, and it is earnest for what it is. It's like it's the type that people hate that gives it a bad name, like the postmodern deconstruction, is when it's like winking at the camera. That's kind of the stuff when you lose all the stakes and earnestness. That's the really bad stuff. But but yeah, that would make me kind of laugh to do like what's Die Hard, but like at any point where something just normal, the cliche, just different stuff is constantly happening. Alex BRB, he can assume she'll be okay with it and then call from the coffee shop and pretend he's still on the roof. That's so funny. I would literally put that in the story. If it's like Die Hard but with cell phones. Like what would happen if Die Hard had cell phones? And like John McClane had a cell phone and first thing he does is call the cops. Second thing he does is call his wife. Then he finds the hang glider and then he's like pretending that he's still up there. David Held says, yeah, most of Alan Moore is deconstruction. Totally. And it is like, I feel like it's good. Like, but yeah, I understand a little bit what people might be saying or whatever. Who was the young comic writer talking about how manga strength is doing what the audience expects? It's kind of a counter to saying you'll do something and then doing it. Yeah, I wonder, is that potentially, that's, I wonder if that's almost like double meta. Like the audience is, they're like, he wouldn't just do the regular thing. Oh my God, he did the regular thing. He did it. I would have never expected that. It was so regular. But actually, I don't know. I don't know who said that. And I don't know why, because manga is less deconstructionist than other stuff. But manga will still get a little, it definitely gets psychological. And the best manga will get like in that realm where it feels more like a novel where you can't really see stuff coming. But I don't know. Yeah, like I'm trying to think like even in Berserk, so Berserk's kind of the best or my favorite or whatever. And it's like I feel like you could expect that Kof Casca and Guts are going to end up together. You can kind of think that maybe, but then it spends like hours and 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 hours, and you're like, oh, never mind. There's no way. And then they do, and you're like, oh, they did the thing right when I gave up hope that that might happen. Then they did do it. So that's kind of a fun twist on that kind of thing too. And in that case too, it's not like they say it. It's not like they say like, we should maybe hook up sometime. Yes, but not yet because I hate you. But maybe one day we will. And what do you know? One day we did. Like it's nothing like that. I guess that's just kind of getting into like show don't tell kind of thing. Because the problem doesn't really come up if you're doing show don't tell a lot. You won't have too much of the problem of where it's kind of redundant or whatever. Then when she isn't okay with it, he has to scale a taller building and glide back onto the roof. Yeah, I would put that in it too. Or Alex, you're the co-writer / the actual writer. I'll just put together your ideas. Just wrote Die Hard 6. Die Hard 2 Die Hard. That should be the title. I'm getting too old for this shit. Yeah. Nice. Um, cool. Yeah, and we did go over this whole list in a previous video. But yeah, that the twisty, mind-blowing stuff, psychological stuff, the novelistic stuff, anything that steps outside. You know, you could sometimes not call it deconstructionist if, in a way, it's like before, like when I was talking about Nosferatu or Hang 'em High, but so you know, like at a certain point, movies get a lot more formulaic, and then if you step out of the formula, you get accused of being deconstructionist. But I'm like, well, what happened before the formula was a thing? That all that stuff was just like regular. That was like constructionist. That was when they were trying to figure out the formula, but they hadn't quite figured it out yet. That's all like my favorite stuff. And then the formula happens, and then yeah, if you go back to that, they call it deconstructionist. I'm like, yeah, but it was before the formula. That's all it is. But yeah, okay. I think I'm gonna get out of here. There was about 12 people watching the whole time. So thanks everyone for hanging out, participating in the chat. It's fun to talk this kind of stuff. I do enjoy it, and it helps me with my own projects. Hope it helps you guys. I assume most of you guys are like creators in your own way, or just enjoying the stuff, whatever. But Let's all get some good projects going. And Nosferatu. I bet everyone here has backed it, or you already own it. But this is a thing; it's available, and there is a good mini comic for it that is borderline a little bit outside the box, maybe. Not to talk it up. Don't get your hopes up, because then you'll be disappointed. But get your hopes really low, and you'll be super stoked on the mini comic. Okay. Got to construct before you can deconstruct. But that doesn't mean you can't still construct. Heck, you could alternate in the same book. Yeah, I think I do like that. Okay. All right, everyone, have a good night, and I'll see you guys later.